Hey everyone, Chris here. So I've been going over the new player's handbook. I've already gone over all kinds of spells. I've gone over the origin feats. I've gone over the backgrounds. Now we're going to get into the general feats, and there are a lot of them. So this is going to be 3 parts for this video. In today's video, I'm going to go over the first 15 general feats presented, and then 14 in my next 2 videos. Now with origin feats, I ranked them in terms of what I thought they were in terms of power from top to bottom. I haven't done that with general feats. There's too many to do that with. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a rating, 1 out of 5 as to how good I think it is. 5, of course, being the best and 1 being pretty lousy. And I'm going to ask that if you are watching right now and you are not subscribed, consider subscribing, especially if you're enjoying these videos. I'm pushing for 100,000 subscribers. It sure helps the channel out, sure helps me out. So I'd really appreciate it. And I don't see any point in wasting time. We got a lot to go over. So let's start looking at the feats that are general feats. Now, these all require a prerequisite of 4th level or higher. So you cannot take these at character creation, and you cannot take these as your extra feat if you choose the human species. So we're going to start here with a feat that's kind of, sort of, maybe a feat. The ability score improvement feat, and that's why I'm doing 15 in this video, because this one barely counts. So, of course, got to be 4th level or higher, and it is the same it has always been, where you're going to select +2 for one of your ability scores, or +1 for 2 of your ability scores, and I don't think I have much more to say about it other than it's decent, right? So, 3 out of 5. Next up comes the actor feat. So this is going to require not just you being 4th level, you're also going to need a charisma of 13 or higher. This is going to look very similar to the actor feat in the 2014 Player's Handbook. You increase your charisma score. While you're disguised as a real or fictional person, you have advantage on charisma, deception, or performance checks to convince others that you are that person. And mimicry, you can mimic the sounds of other creatures, including speech. A creature that hears the mimicry must succeed on a wisdom insight check to determine the effect is faked, and the DC is based on your charisma modifier plus your proficiency bonus. Other than really minor tweaking, this is basically the same as the actor feat that you saw in the 2014 Player's Handbook. For the right kind of character, if you're planning on using like the disguise self spell, the actor feat can be amazing in that situation, but it's very specific. This isn't a feat I just want on any character that uses charisma. It has to be one that tries to mimic other people. So I think it's pretty specific. I'm going to give it 2 out of 5. Remember, of course, just because I ranked it lower than another feat doesn't mean you don't want it on your character, but it does mean that you just don't want it on any character. There's a very specific kind of character that is going to benefit from the actor feat. Next up is Athlete, and that also is going to look very similar to the one we saw in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So you're going to need to be 4th level, and then Strength or Dexterity 13 or higher. I would imagine most characters are going to have either Strength or Dexterity of 13 or higher, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then you're going to increase your Strength or Dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20. You gain a climb speed equal to your speed. When you have the prone condition, you can right yourself with 5 feet of movement. And when making a running long or high jump, you can do so after moving only 5 feet. And I think that's pretty much the same as it was in 2014. And Athlete is okay. It is one of those feats that it can be good on any character. Strength or Dexterity is going to be a primary score for pretty much any martial character is going to have one or the other, unless we've worked our way into doing like charisma for our weapon attacks, which is possible by the rules. But if you are concentrated on strength or dexterity, this will be occasionally useful for you. And if that +1 is going to take you from an odd score on strength or dexterity to an even one, this can be a decent feat. I think 3 out of 5 is the most I can give it, though. Next, we have the Charger feat. We saw this in the playtest. So the Charger feat in the 2014 Player's Handbook is awful. Fortunately, it has been redesigned and heavily improved. However, there were things in the playtest you could do with it that you no longer can, and that's why you'll notice that some of this is highlighted yellow. That's what's changed. So requires a strength or dexterity score of 13 or greater. Again, shouldn't be a problem. Increase your strength or dexterity score by 1. Should be good for most martial characters. When you take the dash action, your speed increases by 10 feet for that action. That's going to work well with anyone who can do dash as a bonus action, like monks or rogues. And then charge attack. If you move at least 10 feet in a straight line towards the target, immediately before hitting it with a melee attack. So in the playtest, you just have to move 10 feet in a straight line. It could be sideways, it could be backwards, and you could do a range attack with it. So you could back up 10 feet and then shoot your bow and get the charger benefit, which was kind of odd. So this makes a lot more sense, but it is also more restricting. It's only going to help you if you are a melee attacker. Then you roll part of the attack action. Choose one of the following effects. You either gain a d8 bonus to the attack's damage roll, which is nice, or you push the target up to 10 feet away if it's no more than one size larger than you. And this would combine, if you have something like the push mastery, you would be able to put the push mastery and charge on the same attack and push something 20 feet. You can only use this benefit once on each of your turns. Overall, I think the charger is pretty good. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. If you are a melee character, it is definitely one I would consider. This was a surprise. Chef. This is from Tasha's. One of the weakest feats in Tasha's has made it through to the new player's handbook, and it's pretty much the same. So you're going to increase your constitution or wisdom by 1. You gain proficiency with cook's utensils if you don't already have it. And then replenishing meal. As part of a short rest, you can cook special food if you have ingredients and cook's utensils on hand. You can prepare enough of this food for a number of creatures equal to 4 plus your proficiency bonus. That should be the entire party. At the end of the short rest, any creature who eats the food and spends 1 or more hit dice to regain hit points regains an extra 1d8 hit points. Now, I will note that in the 2014 rules, the Bard had Song of Rest, which gave an extra die of healing after a short rest. The Bard no longer has that. So if you do want to provide extra healing after a short rest, Chef is a way you can now do that. If you really miss that Bard feature, then you might want to consider Chef. And then bolstering treats with 1 hour of work, or when you finish a long rest, you can cook a number of treats equal to your proficiency bonus if you have ingredients and cook's utensils on hand. These special treats last 8 hours after being made. Creature can use a bonus action to eat one of these treats to gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. That's not very much, right? If you took this feat at level 4, that would give 2 temporary hit points. And once you get to level 5, gets to 3. So it's really a low amount of temporary hit points. So bolstering treats just isn't very good. And replenishing meal, I didn't think Song of Rest was a great feature. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. So, I mean, it does add, there are more ways to use your hit dice now. That's one thing to keep in mind. So this might actually have more benefit than it used to have, because you may have less hit dice to spend because you got, affected by something that uses hit dice, like the healer feat now uses your hit dice in order to heal you. So you might have fewer hit dice for a short rest. So the Chef might be a little bit better than it was in Tasha's. I still don't think it's great. A 2 out of 5 is the best I can give it. Now this one is interesting. So Crossbow Expert, of course, in 2014 was one of the best feats that you could take. Then in the playtest, we saw some strange iterations of Crossbow Expert, and here's where they landed, which is different than the playtest. You're going to notice again, I've highlighted in yellow. This is still part of the official feat. I've just highlighted what I thought was important. So you need a dexterity of 13 or higher. Of course, you're going to have that. You can increase your dexterity score by 1 when you take the feat. You ignore the loading property of the hand crossbow, heavy crossbow, and light crossbow. And then it says, if you're holding one of them, you can load a piece of ammunition into it even if you lack a free hand. This is important because all of those crossbows have what is called the ammunition property. And when you have a weapon with the ammunition property, you need a free hand in order to load the ammunition. One of the weird things about the old rules is if you play Artificers, you have the repeating weapon infusion that allows you to ignore the loading property of a weapon like a crossbow, but it actually doesn't say that you ignore the ammunition property. So technically speaking, if you play by the rules strictly, then you can't use a hand crossbow, even a repeating hand crossbow, in combination with a shield. Now, I don't know a single DM who plays it that way, but technically speaking, that's how it works. So it's very interesting here that they have said that now you can load a piece of ammunition into your hand crossbow without a free hand. Now, keep reading here. Firing in melee, that's the same. So if you are within 5 feet of an enemy, you do not have disadvantage. And dual wielding, this is the other important part. When you make the extra attack of the light property, and hand crossbows do have the light property, none of the other crossbows do, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the extra attack if that attack is with a crossbow that has the light property, that's just hand crossbows, and you aren't already adding that modifier to the damage. So what this means is, with the light property, you have to make the extra attack with a different weapon. So you cannot use the same hand crossbow and just get a bonus action attack anymore. But what you can do that you couldn't do before is you can have a hand crossbow in this hand and a hand crossbow in this hand and fire, right? So that's kind of cool because I think people wanted to do the 2-weapon hand crossbow, and it didn't work before because of the ammunition property. But the Crossbow Expert feat actually allows you to use it with a one hand and no free hand, so you can do your 2-handed crossbow wielder. And just keep in mind that the light crossbow does not have the nick property. That means that if you are wielding 2 hand crossbows, you will have to use your bonus action to get that extra attack of the light property. There's no way to get it as part of your attack action. Now, what you can do is, if your other weapon isn't a hand crossbow, but it is a melee weapon with the nick property, what you could do is you could have a hand crossbow in one hand, and then a melee weapon with the nick property in the other hand, attack with a hand crossbow, then attack... sorry... I'm so excited. Then you can attack with the weapon that has the nick property, and then you can do your extra attack with the nick property, thus putting it all as part of your attack action. So that potentially gives you an opportunity to play hand crossbow and melee weapon user with Crossbow Expert. So a lot of stuff has been opened up here. I think it's pretty cool. It's probably not as powerful, though, as the old Crossbow Expert feat, especially since, in general, I would say that ranged weapons are not as good as melee weapons in the new rules. So I think it's still a 3 out of 5, but I am kind of interested to start looking at character builds that maybe use 2 hand crossbows or a hand crossbow and a melee weapon. Kind of cool. Okay, so Crusher. So Crusher is here from Tasha's, and it's the same. All right, so got to be 4th level or higher. I guess that's different. So all of these have now added the prerequisite of the level requirement. You can increase your strength and constitution score by 1. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, you can move it 5 feet to an unoccupied space if it's no longer than or larger than one size than you. And like before, it doesn't say it has to be horizontal, so you can push them upwards or wherever you want. And the enhanced critical, when you score a critical hit that deals bludgeoning damage to a creature, attack rolls against that creature have advantage until the start of your next turn. I think other than the prerequisite, this is word for word from Tasha's. Oh, and I forgot to rank it. Crusher's a good feat. It's a 4 out of 5. And Defensive Duelist. Okay, so Defensive Duelist in 2014, not very good. It has gotten significantly better. All right, so you need a dexterity of 13 or higher. You increase your dexterity to a maximum of 20. So this is only really going to be a feat you want to take with a dexterity-focused character. Parry. If you are holding a finesse weapon and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can take a reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss you. That's where the 2014 version stops. Now we add. You gain this bonus to your armor class against melee attacks until the start of your next turn. That is a huge, huge improvement. One of the major complaints I have had against these kinds of defenses is that they only work against one attack. Well, you have the shield spell that is working against every attack until the start of your next turn. Well, now Defensive Duelist does as well, but only against melee attacks. Then again, eventually, Defensive Duelist is going to add a +6. That's even more than a shield spell, and it's not using up spell slots. So if I am making a dexterity-focused melee character, one that uses finesse weapons, I could imagine a lot of rogues looking at melee now because Nick is so good. Defensive Duelist is a great option for you. So this has become a very good feat. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Dual Wielder got very, very interesting. Okay, so this is a little complicated. I had to read this incredibly carefully to figure out what the heck it did. So let's go over it, and then I'll explain why it is a little convoluted. So you get Strength or Dexterity 13 is a prerequisite, and then Strength or Dexterity by 1 is increased. Enhanced Dual Wielding. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a weapon that has the light property, you can make 1 extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon, which must be a melee weapon that lacks the two-handed property. You don't add your ability modifier to the attack's extra damage unless that modifier is negative, and Quick Draw, you can draw or stow 2 weapons that lack the two-handed property when you would normally be able to draw or stow only 1. And I read this and I thought, what the heck? That is basically giving you the same benefit that the light property gives you. So I'll bring up the light property for weapons here. Just give me a sec. So here is the light property. It says, when you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, so light weapons, by the way, we got clubs, we've got light hammers, we have got sickles, we have got scimitars, we've got short swords, and we've got hand crossbows. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make 1 extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. That extra attack must be made with a different, next page, light weapon, and you don't add your ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless that modifier is negative. For example, you can attack with a short sword in one hand and a dagger in the other using the attack action and a bonus action, but you don't add your strength or dexterity modifier to the damage roll of the bonus action unless that modifier is negative. So if the light weapons already have that property, then what is the point of you can make 1 extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon? But if you think about it, the light property allows us to make 1 attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon, and Dual Wielder allows us to make 1 extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon. So we can do 2 attacks with our bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon. So then my next thought was, this says we don't add our ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless that modifier is negative. Does that mean if I have the 2-weapon fighting style, do I add my ability modifier to the damage? And I don't think so. Here's 2-weapon fighting. It says, when you make an extra attack as a result of using a weapon that has the light property, not as a result of using the Dual Wielder feat, you add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack if you aren't already adding it to the damage. So what about Nick Mastery? Does Nick Mastery allow us to use that bonus action attack from Dual Wielder as part of the attack action? And I don't think so. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as the bonus action. Again, not of the Dual Wielder feat. So what I make of the Dual Wielder feat is if you are using a light weapon, you can make another attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. If the other weapon isn't light, as long as it doesn't have the two-handed property, you're okay. You can still make the bonus action attack. So there's one case where Dual Wielder will come into play where the light property won't, because with the light property, both weapons must have it. However, if both weapons you have are light, what I believe is you will be making 2 attacks with your bonus action. And if you have the 2-weapon fighting style, you will be adding your ability score modifier to the one you got from the light property, but not the one you got from the Dual Wielder feat. Furthermore, if you have the Nick Mastery, you can take the attack from the light property as part of the attack action, but you cannot take the Dual Wielder attack as part of the attack action. Now, why would that matter then? If I'm using my bonus action anyways, why would it matter? Well, because if you take an attack with the attack action, you can stow a weapon or equip a weapon as part of the attack. You can't do that as part of a bonus action. So there is some benefit to still using a nick weapon with the dual wielder feat. But what this does mean is if you want the absolute maximum number of attacks, which you might if you're using like the new Conjure Minor Elemental spell or the Fount of Moonlight spell, then Dual Wielder is going to give you yet another attack. So you would get, let's say you have extra attack and you're using a couple daggers. You attack with one dagger. It has the light property. You've now unlocked the light property. Then you make your extra attack. Then you make your your bonus action attack, which could be also part of your attack action. And then you get yet another attack with Dual Wielder. So you could be making 4 attacks with a 1 extra attack. So if you want to do the absolute maximum number of attacks, Dual Wielder is going to do it, but it is going to eat up your bonus action every round you use it. Do I think it's good? Yes, because it just combines nicely with some very overpowered spells. So if I'm using Conjure Minor Elementals, if I can get Dual Wielder going on top of the regular light property, I can get so many instances of that huge damage that it's well worth a feat and my bonus action. So I think there's good options here. Got to give it 4 out of 5. I do think I need to add in just a quick caveat that I'm not 100% certain I'm reading it right. I read it very carefully. I read all the little features of Nick and 2-weapon fighting and all that stuff, the light property, very carefully. And I think how I presented it is how it's supposed to work, but we may hear differently from the designers. So this is just my best interpretation of what I've read. That was a complicated one. Let's talk about durable. This one's less complicated. So we're going to increase our Constitution modifier by 1, and we're going to have advantage on death saving throws. And note that that is redundant with one of the champion features. So if you're a fighter champion, you probably don't want durable. And as a bonus action, you can expend one of your hit point dice, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. Note that you do not add your Constitution modifier. So you will heal less than you would if you expended that hit die during a short rest. I think this is pretty weak. The first problem is you can only increase your Constitution modifier. Now, I want Constitution on any character I make, but it's never really my primary. And with feats, I'm generally going to want to increase my primary ability, so I'm not going to be able to do that with durable. Advantage on death saving throws is okay, but usually with D&D, if you go down, somebody can stabilize you at least, if not bring you up with a healing word. So I don't think that's a big deal. And then expending your hit dice, it will be okay in a super rough situation, but if you're unconscious, you're not expending your bonus action, so you have to be conscious. And as soon as you expend those hit dice, just keep in mind you're not getting as much healing from them as you would have if you had expended them during a short rest, or if somebody had used utilize action and the healer feat to heal you, you can expend your hit dice and get a bonus on that roll. So I don't think this is great. I think it's worth either 1 or 2. I'm going to give it a 2, but I think I might be generous. All right, Elemental Adept. So from the Player's Handbook 2014, and you require the spellcasting or pack magic feature. Of course, you wouldn't want it if you didn't have those. Increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1, and then choose one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. Spells you cast ignore resistance to damage of the chosen type. In addition, when you roll damage for a spell you cast that deals damage of this type, you treat any 1 on the damage die as a 2. Then you can take this feat more than once, but you must choose a different type of damage each time. For energy mastery, you would never take this more than once, I don't think. So this would be for your ultra damage specialist. So, you're playing the Draconic Sorcerer and focusing on fire spells. Then you might choose Elemental Adept Fire. The one thing I'll say that makes this a lot better than the 2014 version is at least you're increasing your primary ability score. So if I'm playing that Draconic Sorcerer, I can increase my charisma, and my charisma is increasing my damage on those fire spells. So there are definitely cases where I'll want Elemental Adept. I probably wouldn't bother with it on 90% of casters, though. Only a caster that's really going to focus on a single damage type. Keep in mind, this is only on your spells. So if you're a Dragonborn that breathes fire, it doesn't work for that. It's only working on your spells. I think it's very niche. 2 out of 5. There's definitely characters I'd take it on, but it's not something I'd put on a general character. Hey, and this looks familiar, Fey Touched. So if you are an optimizer, you've been taking Fey Touched ever since Tasha's came out, because it's always been a half feat and a pretty good one, and it basically hasn't changed other than adding the 4th level prerequisite, so you can increase any of your mental scores by 1, making it good for any caster. Choose 1 first level spell from the Divination or Enchantment School of Magic. You always have that spell and the Misty Step spell prepared. Misty Step, of course, is a great spell. You can cast each of these spells without expending a spell slot. Now, this makes Fey Touched a little bit better, because in the old rules, if you cast Misty Step, because it was a bonus action spell, you can cast any other spell on your turn unless it was a cantrip. However, in the new rules, if you cast a spell without using a spell slot, it doesn't restrict any other spell casting on that turn. So if you use your free use of Misty Step with Fey Touched, it will not interfere with your spell casting with your action, which is nice. And then once you cast either spell this way, you can't cast a spell that way again until you finish a long rest, but you can use your spell slots to continue to cast them. So Fey Touched, always been a good feat, remains a good feat. I figure it's 4 out of 5. All right, Grappler, often considered the worst feat in the game before the new player's handbook. Things are going to change big time. All right, so prerequisites, you need your strength or dexterity of 13 plus. I'm glad they said strength or dexterity, because monks can use their dexterity for grappling now and probably dump their strength. And it would be a shame if they got locked out of this feat, but they're not. And monks and grappler are going to go together like butter and bread. So you can increase your strength or dexterity score by 1. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can use both the damage and grapple option, which means basically you can grapple for free once per turn. You can use this benefit only once per turn. You have advantage on attack rolls against a creature grappled by you, and your speed isn't halved when you move a creature grappled by you if the creature is your size or smaller. If you are a monk, I think this is a must-have feat. Monks, of course, one of the biggest advantages of them is they get lots of attacks. Well, with Grappler, you're essentially getting 1 more, because one of your unarmed strikes is essentially going to be both a regular hit as well as a grapple attempt. And then it means you're going to be grappling a lot. And as soon as you grapple, you're going to get advantage on all your attacks. And that free hand you're using to grab somebody isn't really a problem if you're making unarmed strikes. So that's exceptionally good. And then the fast wrestler, wow. So, I mean, especially if you're a monk, imagine you grapple somebody and you can take them across the map. And you combine this with things like spike growth, and it gets seriously out of control. Spike growth and grappling was already broken. Spike growth plus grappling plus the grappler feat is twice as broken. So, wow, Grappler is really powerful now, especially for monks. But frankly, any character that you want to grapple with, Grappler is going to be a must-have, just about a must-have. Exceptional. 5 out of 5? I think I'm going to give it 5 out of 5. All right, Great Weapon Master. So, very well-known feat from 2014. Had the -5 +10 option. A lot of people were upset that that went away. I think you're going to be happy with what you see. Do you notice? I have some highlights on the screen here. That's not part of the feat, by the way. I've added that in just because that's an important note. So you need a strength of 13 or higher. You can increase your strength score by 1. When you hit a creature with a weapon that has the heavy property as part of the attack action on your turn, you can cause the weapon to deal extra damage to the target. The extra damage equals your proficiency bonus. Full stop. In the playtest, it said once per turn. That is gone. Every attack from the attack action is going to have your proficiency bonus added to damage, including any ranged heavy weapon, like longbows and heavy crossbows. Your barbarian can do great damage now with a longbow if they take Great Weapon Master. And then immediately after you score a critical hit with a melee weapon or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with one, you can make one attack with the same weapon as a bonus action. If you are making a strength-based melee character, Great Weapon Master has to be your first selection. It's so good now. No -5 to hit, and you're adding your proficiency bonus, which is eventually going to be +6. So imagine, we gave up -5 +10, but we're eventually going to get -0 +6 on every attack with the attack action. Now, it's only with the attack action. So if you get a bonus action attack through Polar Master, which we'll be going over soon, that won't have the bonus to damage. But if you have extra attack, especially if you're a fighter and you can make multiple extra attacks, this will add up. And it is very nice to be able to switch from melee to range and be able to get the bonus to damage either way. Now, the one thing this isn't going to work great for is if you are playing an archery character with a longbow, it would be very tempting to take this and get that extra damage. But keep in mind, you're increasing your strength score, which probably isn't the ability score you wanted to increase. So it is going to be a tough fit. But if you are a melee character and you want to have a ranged backup weapon, Great Weapon Master is going to be so good for you. I think this is also a 5 out of 5. And here's the last feat we're going to cover in this video, Heavily Armored. So you need medium armor training in order to get this feat. And you increase your constitution or strength score by 1 to a maximum of 20. It's going to be good for most characters who want to wear heavy armor. And you gain training with heavy armor. Now, the thing is heavy armor generally, at best, is going to give you a +1 higher than medium armor. You definitely also don't want heavily armored on any character that's dexterity based. You want to be strength based because you're going to need a strength of 15 for that best heavy armor. But I guess I'd have to look at builds. There might be builds where you're not going to have heavy armor and you're going to be strength based and one heavy armor. I gotta think that's going to be rare. Maybe if you are going into fighter or paladin from something else. I don't know. And barbarians, this is going to be useless because they can't rage in heavy armor. And for rangers, this is going to be useless. They can't use their features in heavy armor. And the other characters that are going to be wearing heavy armor probably are already proficient. I think this kind of sucks. I'm going to give it 1 out of 5. So that's the first 15 feats. And we'll go over the next 14 in my next video. I hope you'll join me for that. Until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.